don't have very big lecture or things to say. Some of them would be repetitive. Nonetheless, coming from my heart. Ambassador Quinn, Mr. Ruan, Jeannie, and Julie Borlaug, fellow colleagues, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Perhaps it is ironic that Mexico, my adopted country, became the home of modern wheat research, a somewhat unlikely candidate for this prestigious role, because it is 10,000 kilometers from the center of wheat's origin in the Fertile Crescent in present-day Iraq. But it was the semi-dwarf wheats that Norman Borlaug and his colleague grew in Mexico that literally sowed the seeds to greatly improve food security in Mexico and triggered the Green Revolution in late 1960s. I grew up half a world away in India, near the small farming community of Raipur, which is a very small village, as a matter of fact. Yesterday, Raipur got listed as, because it happened to be capital of Chhattisgarh. I don't come from capital. I come from a small village in the eastern parts of the Uttar Pradesh, which is the east of Delhi. My childhood was not easy. My family made a meager living growing maize, rice, wheat, sugarcane, and millets. And there was a few goats, buffaloes, and cows. I have dedicated my life to improving the lot of smallholder farmers worldwide, because I came from that background. Seeing people living in poverty ignited a passion in me to dedicate my life to work that could make a real difference. In these early days of the early days of the Indian independence, 96% of rural children lacked basic schooling. I was one of the fortunate 4%. My parents valued education and made many sacrifices to send me to school. I joined the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, CIMMYT, in 1969, a few years after the great events of Green Revolution. Which has already taken place especially in India and Pakistan. Despite the food security gains, there was no time for complacency, as Dr. Borlaug always reminded. There were still mountains to climb. The fight against hunger had not yet been won. And the fight for food and nutrition security had not yet even begun. With my companion in arms, in particular at that time, late Dr. Glenn Anderson, Bert Curtis and Tony Fisher, all of whom led CIMMYT's global wheat program after Borlaug. Before me, my goal was to expand NARM's global vision, which were very much taught by him. What was that? Quite a lot has changed at CIMMYT since I joined. But the mission remains the same: to free farmers and consumers worldwide from food insecurity and poverty by sustainably increasing the productivity of maize and wheat-based cropping system. After my long career as a breeder and wheat director at CIMMYT, I spent 8 years as director of biodiversity and integrated gene management program and consultant to Director General of ICARDA, Dr. Sola happened to be here, at the International Center for Agriculture Research in the dry areas, known as ICARDA. The appointment broadened my views on agriculture, the diversity and complexity of smallholder farming, and the critical importance of water and fertilizer for improved wheat, barley, and food legumes production. Working side by side with farmers in the Middle East, North Africa, and various other national programs system, I saw the real problems caused by diseases and insects in farmers' fields in a fertile crescent, just where the wheat had originated. A lot of problem. And you can realize if the wheat originated there, the insects and the pest also originated there. Our achievement in Mexico were not a sudden change, but a process over time evolving a large global team. NARM always understood that progress is continuous. However, the single most important factor which became the driving force behind the success of CIMMYT's wheat program was the investment in people, in particular young scientists. One of NARM's main goal was to inspire the next generation, a value is strongly instilled in me and many others, and I know World Food Foundation has taken that responsibility with tremendous seriousness. There is a certain knowledge base that cannot be acquired in a classroom, but requires time in the field. For the agricultural scientists belong in the field, according to Dr. Borlaug, and me too. Researchers should be able to communicate with all farmers and understand how to feel to be a farmer. In 1983, on behalf of CIMMYT, I visited China with a vision to bring training to young scientists, just as NARM had done 20 years earlier in India and Pakistan. NARM and I found that older scientists were often set in their ways, and that continuous training of young scientists with open, fertile minds was critical to promote new ideas, germplasm, and technology. Training is still a pillar of CIMMYT's work, and I believe ICARDA's work and other CGIAR centers' work. For me, it is the basic foundation on which all agricultural research can help farmers. NARM and I promoted an international community by connecting scientists across the world. Investment in training is an investment in scientists and in our future. Applied training should be the standard for any scientific institution. We want to build on the legacy of Norman Borlaug and foster international agricultural community of applied training by creating the Borlaug Training Center Foundation. This will facilitate agricultural-based education with the ultimate aim to achieve impact in farmers' fields. This is the best legacy we can create in the missions Norman Borlaug believed in. Nothing is constant. We must respect history, but cannot get stuck in the past. We must learn from it and continue to build on. Today, the wheat research community has a new partner to reach out, the private sector. As we have seen from the successes of the past, the public sector and the private sector can work well hand in hand. It is important, even in these times of economic uncertainty, that governments remember that vitally important needs to feed a growing global population, especially in the face of climate change. The private sector also presents a tremendous opportunity to both wheat research and to developing countries. They can provide genetic resources, they can support genetic resource, and which can protect genetic diversity. Private companies can provide training for PhD students from developing countries. And especially hybrid wheat technology presents an investment prospects for the private sector, and we should be partnering in that. However, all partnership require an open sharing of information about the use of CGIAR germplasm, breeding lines, and improved wheat varieties. CIMMYT and ICARDA's achievements results from partnership involving national agriculture research institutions, farmers' organizations, universities, seed companies. There can be no permanent progress in the battle for food and nutritional security until all the partners that fight for food production unite in a common effort. The success of wheat laid the foundation for the creation of CGIAR in 1971. And that was the legacy of Dr. Borlaug, unique legacy of him. I believe CGIAR would not have been created unless he had succeeded in Green Revolution. CGIAR is now comprised of 15 robust international agriculture research centers, with hundreds of scientists around the world conducting research in wheat, maize, rice, millets, barley, lentils, chickpea, sweet potato, cassava, bananas, potato, sorghum, beans, peas, livestock, agroforestry, and aquaculture. In an effort to bolster food security, this is all done to effort to bolster food security and reduce poverty. It's a tremendous integrated approach. Funding for agriculture research for development has increased over the last 5 years. Yet today, wheat the staff of life for 1.2 billion people is one of the lowest funded crops in terms of research. It is encouraging that, though, agriculture is back on the development agenda. There are many important new initiatives at the nexus of food security and nutrition, sustainable livelihood, and biodiversity conservation. However, this funding is too fragmented, without clear priorities, and without alignment towards our biggest challenges. Based on current crop yields, feeding more than 9 billion people by 2050 will not be a trivial task. Sustainably, increasing wheat production will have a crucial impact on food security and livelihoods. For wheat alone, we will need to grow 60% more grain than now, and on the same amount of land, all while trying to use fewer nutrients, less water, and labor. Sub-Saharan Africa is the next frontier. Demand for wheat is growing there faster than any other commodity in a region that is not traditionally considered to be wheat eating. This demand is driven by population growth, urbanization, as well as from a growing female workforce, preferring wheat product because they are fast and easy to prepare, freeing time that would otherwise be spent on traditional food processing and production. India has changed a lot since my childhood. Today, 71% of rural children are enrolled in primary school, a far cry from 4% during my time. Today, India's economy is one of the fastest growing global economies, and today India is harvesting nearly 95 million metric tons of wheat per year, compared to 10 million metric tons prior to Green Revolution. It almost tenfold increase, only increase in acres by 3 times. But there is another India, one that is home to more than 20% of the world's poor. An India where 40% of children under the age of 5 are stunted. And an India where the production of wheat is not keeping pace with the fast-growing population. India's economic development has not been sufficient to significantly reduce poverty, especially for the 80 million Adivasis, the indigenous population of India, and keeper and stewards of its both plants and animal biodiversity. The inspiration for my work partly comes from my childhood experiences in rural India. Unlike many of my contemporaries, I was given the privilege to receive an education, training and skill, and even the power to be a role model for the next generation of leadership. To give other young Indians the opportunity I had, I would be donating, let me say more loudly, I would be donating part of the World Food Prize money to an educational foundation in India. The history of wheat is the history of civilization. Over 10,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent, our ancestors ascended from an existence as hunter-gatherer and began tending and domesticating crops. This began with symbiotic relationship with the history of civilization and humankind's responsibility as stewards of planet Earth. Yet, without improved investment from both the private and public sector, wheat is at risk, especially if the decline in public investment in wheat research continues as it has. From South Asia through to Central Asia, across the Middle East, and to the North Africa, wheat is the staff of life for 1.2 billion people who live on less than $2 a day. For them, wheat provides 20 to 50% of their daily calories and 20% of their protein. New ways must be found to spur public and private support for wheat research because of the time and expense required to bring new varieties and technology to the market. We need new varieties to fight the adverse effects of climate change and then make the best use of ever-decreasing available arable land worldwide. The battle to feed more than 9 billion will not be won on only one front. We need intelligent investment from public donors and private companies to underpin research and development. Policies are needed that support fair profits for farmers and functional markets. Our work must foster equity for women and disadvantaged, while improving incomes and livelihood. Let no one think that we can relax our efforts. Dr. Norman Borlaug always reminded that. There is no room for complacency. He always keeps saying that. Those of us who believe in a food-secure future must redouble our efforts to ensure that in 2050, 9.5 billion people have enough to eat. It is not simply about releasing new varieties, but the people these varieties will help. If you really believe in helping smallholders farmers, which according to FAO statistics are 500 million farms inhabiting 2 billion people, invest in wheat. Thank you.